Good morning, Doctor. I'm Andrina Tomantin. My metric code is 2X7175. I'm represent from Group 6. In this assignment, the companies we choose is Ocean Case Pacific Berhad and Olympia Industry Berhad. Our group members got Fauza Bindi Modatif, 2X1450, Andrina, 2X7175, Loy Tek Leong, 2X7330, Leverister, 2X7470, No Shafika, 288-109. Move to the next slide. I will start our presentation from introduction. In 1997, Mr. Tan Shu Chen and Mr. Long Po Kiat co-founded the company, which began as a small resonated field and non-urban manufacturer in rented premise and has grown to become one of Southeast Asia's leading suppliers in both segments. Over the past 2 decades, the group has expanded its offering of eco-friendly products and services to customers in Asia and Europe. OceanCare's listing on Malaysian Stock Exchange has strengthened our ability to meet the growing demands of the hygiene and automotive industry. OceanCare is Southeast Asia's largest fuel producer and the region's second largest non-woven fabric manufacturer. They are very proud of their work and the fruitful relationship they have with their valued customer. OceanCare also support their customer at every step of the way, making them a preferred industry partner. In total, OceanCare employs over 200 people across the region. Our headquarters are in Malaysia, Pandu Baru, Bengaini. OceanCare Group owns and operates non-woven and felt production facilities in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand, allowing them to serve their customer across the region quickly. OceanCare Pacific Berhad, which is listed on Bursa Malaysia Stock Exchange, owns 100% of all business entities in the OceanCare Group.
Hello, sir. My name is Ravinza Anaswester. My number matrix is 287470. Now I want to discuss about my part of the assignment is liquidity ratio. Liquidity ratio for the OceanCare Pacific Berhad and Olympia Industry Berhad. In the liquidity ratio, I will discuss two types of liquidity ratio. First is current ratio and second is quick ratio. Now we just take a look for the current ratio for these two companies. Based on the tables, current ratio for Ocean Pacific Berhad is 3.06. This situation displayed that current asset for the company is in 2020 are 51,054,338 ringgit, or higher than the company's liabilities are 60,658,304 ringgit. While for Olympia Industry Berhad, the current ratio for this company is 1.1. It is because this company also showed that the company current assets are 80,048 ringgit, which are higher than current liabilities are 67,983 ringgit. This situation display that the current ratio of the OceanCare Pacific Berhad was 1.8 higher than Olympia Industry Berhad as at 31st of December 2020. Now we take a look for the quick ratio. Based on the table, the quick ratio for OceanCare Pacific Berhad is 2.50. This situation displays those quick assets for the company in 2020 are 41,666,433 ringgit, or higher than the company liabilities are 16,658,304 ringgit. However, for Olympia Industry Berhad, the quick ratio for this company is 0.93. It is because this company showed that the company's quick assets are 63,891 ringgit, were lower than current liabilities are 67,983 ringgit. The situation displayed that the quick ratio of the OceanCare Pacific Berhad was 1.57 higher than Olympia Industry Berhad. That's all for me. Thank you.
Firstly, my name is Nur Syafiqah Shahira Muhammad Anwar, metric number 288109. I would like to continue the discussion with 3.0 activity ratio. There are two types of activity ratio. First, total asset turnover, and second, account receivable turnover. First, total asset turnover. Total asset turnover is a financial statistic that assesses how well a firm uses its asset to generate sales revenue or profit. Asset turnover is a kind of activity ratio, which is a collection of financial measures that determine how effectively a firm utilizes its asset. This ratio measures the efficiency of asset in producing sales. The total asset turnover for Asian Case Pacific Berhad is 0.083, meanwhile for Olympia Industries Berhad is 0.076. Both companies have a total asset turnover lower than 1. Lower ratio means that the company is not using its asset efficiently and most likely have management or production problem. This means that for every ringgit Malaysia in asset, Ocean Case Pacific Berhad only generates 0.083 cents. In other words, the company started up in not very efficient with its use of asset. Same goes to an Olympia Industries Berhad, which is only generate 0.076 cents for every ringgit Malaysia in asset. Second, account receivable turnover. The receivable turnover ratio, also known as the debtor turnover ratio, is an accounting metric that assesses a company's ability to offer credit and recover debts. The receivable turnover ratio is an activity ratio that determines how well a company utilizes its assets. Account receivable turnover is an efficiency or activity ratio that determines how many times a company's account receivable may be converted into cash in a given period. In other words, the account receivable turnover ratio determines how many times a company's average account receivable may be collected over the course of a year. The account receivable turnover for Ocean Case Pacific Berhad is 0.145, which is lower than Olympia Industries Berhad that recover 1.025. Because the receivable turnover ratio assesses a company capacity to collect receivable effectively, it stands to reason that a greater ratio would be better. Companies that have higher ratio recover their receivable more frequently throughout the year. As you can see, Ocean Case Pacific Berhad's turnover is 0.145. This means that the company did not collect the receivable for 2020. A low receivable turnover ratio might be the result of a poor collection procedure, poor credit policies, or credit that are not financially viable or creditworthy. A low turnover ratio usually indicates that the company's credit rules need to be reviewed in order to ensure prompt recovery or receivable. For Olympia Industries Berhad, the turnover is 1.025, which means that company collect the receivable once a year. In other words, when the company makes a credit sale, it will take a year to collect the cash from that sale. A high receivable turnover ratio might suggest that a firm's account receivable collection is effective and that the company has a high number of high-quality customers who pay their bills on time. A high receivable turnover ratio might also imply that a business is run on a cash basis. A high percentage might also indicate that a business is cautious about offering loans to its clients. That's all from me. Thank you.
My name is Loi Tet Long and my metric number is 287330. I would like to present the profitability ratios of Ocean Case Pacific Berhad and Olympia Industries Berhad. Profitability ratios is a measure that used to determine how much earnings a business can generate. In this project, the profitability ratios include profit margin on sales and return on assets. Profit margin on sales is the ability of a company to earn net income from sales. It is better for a company if they have a higher profit margin on sales because it shows that their profits will be more than expenses. Return on assets is a financial statistic that shows how profitable a business is in comparison to its total assets. Companies that have a better returns on investment are more efficient and productive in managing their balance sheets to create profits. Profit margin on sales is calculated by using the net income divided by net sales, then multiplied by 100%. In this calculation, it shows that the profit margin on sales for Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad is 5.38%, which is higher than Olympia Industries Berhad, that only recorded as negative 38.29%. This situation displays that Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad had a better condition because it received more profit from the sale than Olympia Industries Berhad. The profit margin on sales on Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad is better because it has more revenue than expenses, whereas Olympia Industries Berhad has less revenue than expenses and therefore its profit becomes less. Next, the return on assets is calculated by using the net income divided by average total assets, then multiplied by 100%. The result of this calculation is the return on assets for Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad and Olympia Industries Berhad were 6.38% and negative 9.45% respectively. It is clear that Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad has more return on assets than Olympia Industries Berhad. It indicates that Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad earns more money due to more investment compared to Olympia Industries Berhad. In other words, Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad is more profitable relative to its assets investment compared to Olympia Industries Berhad. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fauza. My metric number is 281450. So today I will be presenting leverage ratio. One of the most important leverage ratio is debt to assets ratio. So debt to assets ratio determines how much the company's assets are generated from debt. So the formula for debt to assets ratio is the total amount of long-term and short-term debt divided by the total amount of assets. Generally, a high debt to assets ratio means that the company has high leverage. So when a company has high leverage, it means that they have high risk of being unable to pay back their debts. So generally, companies want to have a low amount of debt to assets ratio. So in this case, Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad has a lower debt to assets ratio than Olympia Industries Berhad. So this means that Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad has a lower risk compared to Olympia Industries Berhad. Nonetheless, since both companies have their debt to assets ratio lower than 1, this means that they are not facing major bankruptcy risks. Next, we have debt to equity ratio. Debt to equity ratio determines the extent of a company's operations is financed through debt rather than its own funds. So debt to equity ratio is calculated by the total amount of liabilities divided by the total amount of shareholders' equity. So generally, a high amount of debt to equity ratio means that a huge amount of the company's operations is financed through debt. So what this means that, for example, if there were a recession, so the company may be unable to pay back its debts and therefore face the risk of bankruptcy. So generally, companies want to have a low amount of debt to equity ratio. But if the debt to equity ratio is too low, this means that the company may be underperforming because since all their operations are financed through their own money, this means that the company may have a very slow growth compared to its competitors. So generally, debt to equity ratio cannot be too high or too low. So in this case, Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad has a lower debt to equity ratio than Olympia Industries Berhad. So in this case, it generally means that Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad has lower financial risk than Olympia Industries Berhad. But it can also means that Ocean Cash Pacific Berhad has a lower rate of growth compared to Olympia Industries Berhad.